Judge Frank Caprio had presided over countless cases in his long career, but there were moments that stayed with him more than others. Among the many defendants who had stood before him, one man left an impression that could not be erased. His name was Victor, and the first time he appeared in the courtroom, he was 96 years old. The charge seemed simple enough, a routine violation that judges see every day. Victor had been stopped for speeding in a school zone. The clerk announced the case, and Judge Caprio leaned forward as the elderly man addressed him. "Mr. Cruella, you are charged with a school zone violation," the judge began. Victor answered, without hesitation. "I don't drive that fast, Judge. I'm 96 years old and I drive slowly. I only drive when I have to." His words were calm, steady, almost apologetic. He was not making excuses, but explaining himself in the way of a man who had lived nearly a century and carried no need to embellish. The judge asked why he had been driving that day. Victor explained that he had been taking his son to the doctor. His son, he said, was handicapped and undergoing cancer treatment. There was a pause as the courtroom absorbed his words. 96 years old, still driving, still caring for a 67-year-old son who depended on him. Caprio's expression softened. He asked, almost with disbelief, "So, you are 96 years old, and you are taking care of your 67-year-old son?" Victor nodded simply. "That's right, Judge. I was taking him for blood work." The weight of the case shifted entirely. What had begun as a speeding ticket became a story of devotion. Caprio responded, "God bless you. You are a good man." The charge itself seemed meaningless compared to the larger truth of what was happening. Here was a father whose duty to his child had never ended, not even after 9 decades of his own life. The case was dismissed with compassion, but the moment did not end there. The exchange was recorded and later posted online. It quickly spread, capturing hearts across the world. More than 400 million people viewed the clip, and comments poured in from every corner of the globe. People spoke of their own parents, of their children, of sacrifices that defined their families. They saw in Victor the embodiment of love that did not retire with age. He had not only stunned the judge, he had reminded millions of what it meant to remain devoted, no matter how many years had passed. Months later, Judge Caprio visited Victor at his home. The courtroom setting was gone, replaced by the warmth of personal hospitality. There were no legal documents, no bailiffs, no charges. Instead, there was the simplicity of 2 men meeting as friends. Victor welcomed him not with complaints about the past, not with excuses about his speeding ticket, but with kindness. He served an apple pie he had baked himself, and Judge Caprio later admitted it was the best he had ever tasted. That small act said more than words ever could. For Victor, generosity was second nature, as natural to him at 96 as it had been throughout his life. To give, to share, to care, this was who he was, even after nearly a century of living. Time moved on, as it always does, and the judge returned again when Victor was 99 years old. This time, the visit carried the familiarity of old friends who had shared something rare. They were not bound by law anymore, but by respect, by admiration, by a memory of a courtroom moment that had touched the world. Caprio greeted him warmly, smiling as though greeting a relative. "Hello, Victor. How old are you now?" Victor's reply was simple, but carried with it both pride and disbelief. 99. He said it as though even he could not quite believe the number. The judge reminded him of the first time they met. "When you came to court, you told me about your son who was 67 then. He was undergoing treatment and you were driving him to the doctor. How is he doing now?" Victor answered as honestly as always. "He's coming along pretty good. He has his good days and his bad days, but he's doing very good." Caprio's face grew thoughtful. He nodded slowly and said, "I know what it is to worry about your sons. I have 4 of them. One of them is here today. My son David. Victor's eyes brightened. I know David. Very good man. The conversation shifted easily from memories of the past to lighter matters of the present. They decided to make an apple pie together, using Victor's recipe, a recipe perfected over decades. The judge announced it with enthusiasm. Now the magical moment has arrived. We are going to make an apple pie with Victor's recipe, and he will guide us through every single step. Victor was ready, his instructions clear. He directed the judge to place the dough into the plate, then to fill it with sliced apples. He spoke as someone who had repeated these steps hundreds of times, never tiring of the rhythm of baking. Now add the sugar, he said. The judge asked how much. Victor measured not with cups or spoons, but with the instinct of experience. 3/4 of a cup, maybe a little more. I do it by hand. Salt followed, sprinkled lightly. Then came butter, cut into pieces and distributed across the apples. Lemon juice was poured in. 1 tablespoon, Victor said, though it was not precise science, but memory and habit. Cinnamon was dusted over the top, then nutmeg. Finally came the special touch, Grand Marnier, a splash of orange liqueur that gave the pie its unique character. Victor admitted he used a little more than a tablespoon, though his pour was generous. The judge teased him. That looks more like a flood than a tablespoon. They laughed together, the easy laughter of men who had long since put away the roles of judge and defendant. How many pies have you made in your life? Caprio asked. As he stirred the mixture, Victor thought for a moment. Maybe 1 every 2 weeks. The math was staggering. Over 1,000 pies baked across a lifetime, each one carrying with it memory, practice, and love. When the pie was assembled and placed into the oven, they sat together and spoke not of baking, but of life. Caprio asked, Victor, if you had advice for young people, what would you say? Victor did not hesitate. Don't argue with anybody. That's the first thing. Because when you argue, you get tension. When you get tension, you get nervous. And when you get nervous, you're no good. Eat 3 meals a day and listen to your mother and father. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. They were not theories but truths earned through nearly a century of living. The judge nodded in agreement, and his son David echoed the sentiment, saying that every day he was reminded that fathers often knew best. At last the timer rang, and the pie was ready. They removed it from the oven, its crust golden and its filling bubbling beneath. After letting it rest, they cut into it. The judge lifted his fork, tasted the first bite, and paused. He smiled and declared it perfect. The apples were sweet, the cinnamon balanced, the Grand Marnier subtle but present. This is fit for a king, he said. Victor accepted the praise with humility. I hope so. I hope everything came out all right. Caprio looked at him with seriousness. Victor, you are an inspiration to everyone watching this and to everyone who knows you. It was a moment that went beyond pie, beyond traffic tickets, beyond age. It was the meeting of 2 men, one who spent his life dispensing justice and one who spent his life quietly living it through devotion, generosity, and love. The years continued, and Victor turned 100. Few people lived to see such a number, and fewer still with such clarity, strength, and presence of mind. For his milestone birthday, he did not ask for attention or celebration, but instead promised to make lasagna, claiming with a smile that it would be the best the judge had ever tasted. Even at 100 years of age, when most people are long retired from every responsibility, Victor was still planning, still creating, still giving. His life had not slowed into silence. It remained an act of generosity and devotion. By the time he reached 101, Victor was remembered not as a man who had once been charged with speeding, but as someone who embodied devotion, wisdom, and joy. The ticket itself had long been forgotten. What endured was the lesson hidden within that brief courtroom encounter. His story was told again and again, not because of a violation, but because of the values it revealed: love for family, loyalty that never weakened, humility that shone through even in the smallest of details. He had first come into the public, I as a 96-year-old father driving his 67-year-old son to a doctor's appointment. It was a moment that shocked the world. A father in his 10th decade of life, still carrying the responsibility of his child's care with dignity. At 99, he reappeared, not in court but in the kitchen, teaching a judge how to bake an apple pie with patience and humor. At 100, he was making plans for lasagna, proving that even a century of living could not dim his love of sharing food and family tradition. And at 101, he was still offering advice to the young, passing down wisdom with the simplicity that comes only from lived experience. Judge Caprio often said that Victor was one of the best people he had ever met. The judge had presided over thousands of cases and met thousands of defendants. But this one man stood apart. It was not simply his age that made him extraordinary, but the way he lived each year with duty, kindness, and generosity. The story of the 101-year-old speeder is not truly about a traffic ticket. It is about a father's devotion, a man's generosity, and a judge's compassion. It is about how a small courtroom exchange revealed values that reached across the world. Millions saw in Victor a reflection of what mattered most: family, humility, and the wisdom of age. His words remain: do not argue, eat properly, respect your parents. Simple truths, spoken by a man who lived more than a century, that endure because they are universal. Judge Caprio once admitted that Victor left him speechless. "Best people I ever had in my life," he said. Perhaps that is the clearest way to capture the legacy of a man who stunned a judge and inspired the world.